How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're starting Daf Pedal, Daf 84 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, today we begin the 9th parak of Masechta Menachos. Absolutely amazing. I have a lot to do and I'm running late. I really apologize. It's really late. Sheesh. Okay, anyways, so we are starting the 9th parak of Masechta Menachos. We got a lot to do, kind of. I hope it'll keep on moving. I broke it down into two main sections of today's daf, where the Omer and Shtei Halechem come from. I'm talking about Eretz Yisrael versus Chutz La'aretz. I'm talking about Chadash versus Yashan. And then we discuss where the bikurim come from, the first fruits that are brought to the Beis HaMikdash, starting at Shavuos time. What fruits are they brought from? What fruits are they maybe not brought from? Friends, this is what we have on the agenda for today. Let us jump into Daf Pei Dal, Daf 84 of Masechta Menachos. We begin on Daf Pei Gimel Amid Beis at the new Mishnah, at the new Parak. Kol Korbanos Atzibur Ve'ayochid. All sacrifice, all offerings of the, really offerings, because Menachos aren't really sacrifices. All offerings, communal and individual, bain min haaretz, come from Eretz Yisrael, of course, but even from Chutz La'aretz, min hachodesh, min hayashon, from the new crop as well as the old crop. Now, Rashi, in the manuscript, Rashi on the bottom, says min hachodesh, min hayashon, b'menachos ka'amar. That when it says chodesh and yashan, the new crop, the old crop, it's talking about menachos, because menachos come from menachos come from grain, and therefore the menachos have to come from the can come from either the new grain or from the old grain. Now, Tosfos understands Rashi to actually be referring to the whole Mishnah up until now. Is talking about specifically menachos. Kol korbanos and tziva v'yochel is dafka talking about korbanos. Is dafka talking about menachos. But Tosfos says that truth is, other than chadash and yashan, in terms of arts and chutz la'aretz, that could really be talking about other korbanos as well. That many of the other korbanos could also, animal sacrifice could come from chutz la'aretz as well. Anyways. Okay. I realized that I'm missing something. Okay. 1 second. Okay, fine. So, let's do it again. So, kol korbanos atzibur, all korbanos atzibur. So, either it could be talking about only menachos, or it could be that it's talking about all korbanos in terms of animals. But min haaretz and chutz la'aretz come, including animals, come from Eretz Yisrael or from Chutz La'aretz. Now, when it says min hachodesh min hayashon, it could either come from Chadash or from Yashan. That's specifically going to be talking about menachos. Okay, fine. So whatever it is, whether like Rashi, like Tosfos, all of these korbanos, whether individual, whether communal, can come from Eretz Yisrael, can come from Chutz La'aretz, can come from the new crop, can come from the old crop. Unbelievable. Chutz min Omer and Shtei Halechem. Now, when it comes to menachos, specifically Omer and Shtei Halechem, they have to come from Eretz Yisrael. They have to come from the new crop. The Omer and the Shtei Halechem are mamish in the time of the year of the Omer and the Shtei Halechem. We're during Sfiras HaOmer right now. We are between the Omer and the Shtei Halechem. The Omer and the Shtei Halechem need to come from Eretz Yisrael, and they need to come from the new crop. And they all korbanos got to come from the best stuff. What's the best stuff? Machnis v'zitro alpha lesolos. Machnis and zitro, they are the best place to get fine flour. Shnielen, the second best, is Aforayim bibika, a place called Aforayim in the valley. Kol ha'arotzos hayuksheris elamikan ayumavian. Now, in truth, any of the areas are kosher. If you bring the Omer and the Shtei Halechem from any of these other places in Eretz Yisrael, it still works, but these were the best places. Machnis, Zitcho, Aforayim. Says the Gemara, Masnisin Delo Ki Aitana. Our Mishnah is unlike the following Tana. The Sani that we learned in the Brisa, Omer Abba Min Hayoshin Kosher, that the Omer that comes from last year's crop is in fact kasher. Shtei Halechem abos min hayashon ksheris, as well as the Shtei Halechem, if they are also brought from last year's crop, they are kasher. Ele shechiser mitzvah, but it's b'diavad. You really should bring the Omer and Shtei Halechem from this year's crop, and if you bring them from last year's crop, you are missing out on the opportunity to do it properly. Omer, how do you know that the Omer can be offered from last year's crop? The Pasuk says by Minchas Omer, Takriv es minchas bikurecha. Right? What pasuk is this? Right? Ad mimachos. No, I don't think it's that. What's this? No, that's the wrong pasuk. It's hard to tell the difference between a hey and a ches when it's a small type. This pasuk is talking about the minchas omer. Takriv is minchas bikurecha. So it says takriv is minchas bikurecha. Offer it. However you offer it, just offer it. Even if it's from last year's crop, offer it. Shtei Halechem dichsiv, and by the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos it says, Mi moshvosechem taviu v'lo mi chutzos. You got to bring it from moshvosechem. You got to bring it from your homes. Your homes in Eretz Yisrael, not from chutzos. Moshvosechem, and also when it says Mi moshvosechem va'afilu min aliyah, you can bring it from your house. Even if it's from last year's, but bring it from your house. Bring it from Eretz Yisrael, even if it's last year's. So, one second. How are we learning out two things from Mimosh V'Seichem? We said Mimosh V'Seichem v'lo min chutzotz, and we're also learning out from Mimosh V'Seichem v'afilu min aliyah. So, on my crow, the pasuk says taviu v'afilu min aliyah. When the pasuk says Mimosh V'Seichem taviu, it means tavi. However you got to bring it. Just bring it, even if it's last year's crop. Bring it when it comes to the Shtei Halechem. B'ami ba'ila. We learned about this. The Mesorah Shasas is telling me on Daf Ein Zayin. Apparently, Daf Ein Zayin, Amud Beis. Let's confirm. I remember what it looks like. Yeah, that looks like it. Anyways, so we learned Daf Ein Zayin, Amud Beis. That the pasuk says. You see, the pasuk already says by Shtei Halechem, Ad mimachos haShabbos haShvius tispa chamish mom. They crop the mincha chadasha. You'll bring the mincha chadasha that you'll bring the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos, and the very next pasuk says Mimosh V'Seichem taviu. You'll bring it. We literally just said they kravtem mincha chadasha l'Hashem, and the 2 words later we say Mimosh V'Seichem taviu. We just said they kravtem. Why do we need taviu? It's extra. What we learn out from there is Shekol she'ato maybe mimakom acher, that any other chametz loaf that you will be bringing, right? Because the Shtei Halechem is chametz. So any other chametz loaf, hareru kazeh, is like the Shtei Halechem, i.e., it'll be 1 isaron per loaf, which is how we learn out that the Shtei Halechems, that by the Korban Toda, the 10 chametz loaves are 1 isaron each. So we need taviu to teach us that when it comes to the 10 chametz loaves of a korban toda, that they are 1 isaron each. So imkin lichlov kar tavi. Yeah, but to learn that, all I need to say was tavi. My tavi'u shmamina tarte. It's teaching us both things. It's teaching us that the 10 chametz loaves of the korban toda are 1 isaron each, and additionally, it's teaching us even if you have to bring it from last year's crop, it is acceptable. V'aksiv reishis. What about the fact that it says by the Shtei Halechem reishis? It should be the first. The mitzvah. Yeah, you're right. It should be the first, but b'diavad it is kosher if it is not the first. So it says it has to be new. That is necessary for the Brisa. Reb Nosson, Reb Akiva Amru. The Reb Nosson and Akiva said. The Reb Nosson and Reb Akiva said. Now Reb Nosson, the Gemara in I think Masechta Kiddushin says that Rebbe and Reb Nosson were the end of Hora'ah. I think it's the Gemara in Kiddushin. I think it's a Gemara in Kiddushin. I think it's a Gemara. No. I think it's a Gemara in Babble Metzia. I think it is a Gemara in Babble Metzia. What does it say on Babble Metzia? Daf Pei Beis. Babble Metzia. Not Pei Beis. Pei Hey. What does it say on Babble Metzia? Pei Hey. Sfaria. Babble Metzia 85a. Okay, what's this? No, is it not there? Okay, what about 86? Otherwise we gotta go weiter. 86a? What is it? Yeah, there it is. 86a. Babble Metzia 86a. Reb Nosson Sof, right? Rebbe Reb Nosson Sof Mishnah. That Rebbe and Reb Nosson were the end of the Tanoim. Rebbe and Reb Nosson were the end of the Tanoim. Now Rabbi Akiva was Rebbe's Rebbe. So he was like earlier. But anyways, okay, fine. New. So okay, but anyways, the Tani Reb Nosson, Reb Akiva Amru, the Reb Nosson and Reb Akiva said, Shtei Halechem abos min hayashon sheris, that right? So what did we just say? Hoksiv chadasha. It says chadasha. It means it has to be new, right? Not from last year's crop. They said Shtei Halechem abos min Yashon ksheris, that Shtei Halechem that come from Yashon are ksheris umani mekayim chadasha. Then what does it mean that it has to be new? If they can be from last year's crop, Shtei chadasha l'chol menachos, that it's the first of the new menachos. That even though yes, you can bring the Shtei Halechem from last year's crop, however, it is nonetheless, whether brought from this year's crop, whether brought from last year's crop, it is going to be the first mincha. Right? Any menachos that you would like to bring from this year's crop are going to have to wait until after the Shtei Halechem. Whether the Shtei Halechem itself is brought from this year's crop or that year's crop, it's kosher either this year's crop or last year's crop. It's kosher either way. But if you have any intention to bring a korban mincha from this year's crop, it will have to wait until after that Shtei Halechem. Ad kan lo plige ela b'chodosh, aber ba'aretz lo plige. Now, until now, okay, where are we? I feel like my head, unfortunately, is all over the place. It shouldn't really be all over the place, and it's not. Everything's gewaldig. I allowed myself to get distracted with whatever. Somebody distracted me with something, and I allowed myself to get distracted by it, and now I'm all over the place. But all good, nothing major, but whatever. Now it's late. I'm a little bit all over the place, but again, I'm everything's cool. Just I'm a little bit all over the place. Anyways, so where were we? So we had this Mishnah. This Mishnah that says when it comes to Omer and Shtei Halechem, they have to be from Eretz Yisrael and they have to be from the Chodesh. Now, we just saw that there is, however, a brayso that says it doesn't necessarily, the Omer and Shtei Halechem don't necessarily have to be from Chodesh, they can even be from Yashan. Now, we're going to see that up until now, okay, fine, so this Machlokas has been, does it have to be from Chodesh or can it even be from Yashan? Now we're going to see that the Machlokas also extends to whether it even taka has to be from Eretz Yisrael B'chlal. Up until now, where they're arguing about Chodesh, Aval be'eretz lepliga. In terms of the requirement that the Omer and the Shtei Halechem come from Eretz Yisrael, everyone is in agreement. Pe echad, in agreement. Lo pliga, the Omer v'Shtei Halechem me'eretz in mechutz la'aretz lo, that the Omer and the Shtei Halechem have to come from Eretz Yisrael. They can't come from chutz la'aretz. Kaman, who's that like the lo? Ki aitana. It's not like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Omer says Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Omer ba michutz la'aretz, that the Omer can even come from chutz la'aretz. Umani mekayim ki savayu el la'aretz. So then, what does it mean when the pasuk says that ki savo el la'aretz, and then the pasuk continues and says uktzartem es ktsira ve'vesem es Omer, etc. So shalom nischayvu ba'Omer kodem shenichnusu la'aretz. It means that the chiyuv to bring the minchas Omer only began once the Yidden got into Eretz Yisrael. But in terms of where does the Omer have to come from, the actual barley, it couldn't come from Chutz La'aretz. The Kasavar Chodesh b'Chutz La'aretz Doraise. He and Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda holds that, of course, Chodesh in Chutz La'aretz is Mida Oraise, which is what allows us to be able to offer the mincha, the Omer from Chutz La'aretz. If Chodesh in Chutz La'aretz was only Mida Rabbanon, so that would be a little strange to offer the Korban Mincha, the korban, the minchas Omer from barley that Chodesh and Yashan doesn't really apply to midoraisa. So Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda holds that Chodesh and Yashan, right? Chodesh specifically, Chodesh really is midoraisa in Chutz La'aretz, and you can bring from the Chutz La'aretz barley for the minchas ha Omer. Kol mokim she'atem yoshvim mashma. So they learn out that when it says mimosh vosechem, right, v'lechem v'chalim v'karmel lo sochlad etzem hayom hazeh harabirachem es korban elukechem chugzam doschem b'chol mosh vosechem, wherever you live, kol makom shatem yoshvim mashma, wherever you happen to live, the Omer will still be relevant. Chodesh will still be mida oraisa v'chisavo zman biahi. And in terms of when we say v'chisavo el haaretz, it doesn't mean that the Omer, that the barley needs to come from Eretz Yisrael. It can come from Chutz La'aretz. It means that the mitzvah of the Omer kicks in only once the Yidden are in Eretz Yisrael. V'chem de oraisa hi akruvin amim akruvin, and since the Omer in Chutz La'aretz is mida oraisa, the barley can come from Chutz La'aretz, can be offered for the Minchas HaOmer in the Beis HaMikdash, even from Chutz La'aretz, since Chodesh is Midoraisa in chutz laretz. Tanan also we learn in a Mishnah in Shkalim. We learn in a Mishnah in Masechta Shkalim. Shomei sfichin b'shvius noten scharin mitrumas ha-lishka. The Mishnah Masechta Shkalim writes that the Mishnah is discussing different things that the trumas ha-lishka, that the funds of the trumas ha-lishka are spent on. One of the things that they're spent on are the shomei sfichin b'shvius. What are the shomei sfichin b'shvius? What they are that, of course, during Shemitah, nobody's working the land, right? The land is resting. Nobody's working the land during Shemitah. Big shaila. How are we supposed to offer the Omer and the Shtei Halechem on Shemitah if nobody's working the land? Where are we going to get the barley from? Where are we going to get the wheat from? Where are we going to get the barley for the Omer? Where are we going to get the wheat for the Shtei Halechem? So there's the concept of sfichin. Sfichin are things that grow on their own, things that automatically grow. I am not a farmer. I go to the shuk and I buy whatever they have to offer. However, I guess what happens is some things can just kind of grow on their own, right? You can just have seeds that fall on the floor or something, and things grow, things pop up. You're probably not gonna have the same quality and quantity of yield as if you were actually putting effort into it, but things can pop up. So what happens is they notice, there's some barley popping up over here, there's some wheat popping up over here, and they send some people to guard it. I guess, Anyways, so they send some people to guard it and keep an eye on it, and they say, okay, great, we've found our barley, we found our wheat that we're going to be using for the Omer, for the Shtei Halechem, and the payment for those eyes, for those guards, came from the Trumas Halishka. Okay, Givaldim. So tonight we learn in Masechta Shkalim, Shomer Svichim Bashvius, the people who are guarding the wheat and barley aftergrowths on Shemitah, so that they can be used for the Omer and Shtei Halechem. Scharin mitrumas halishka, they are paid from the machzis shekel. Rami bar Choma Rav Chizde. Rami bar Choma asks his shver, asks his father-in-law or future father-in-law, Rav Chizde. Tnan, we learned in this Mishnah that we just mentioned in Masechta Shkalim, Shomesvichim b'ashvius noten schar mitrumas halishka. Okay, that the guards of the Svichim Bashvius, they get their payment, they're paid from the Trumas Halishka. Now that of course implies that Shemitah produce is being used for the Omer. That you're using Shemitah produce, you're guarding it, it's Kedusha Shvius produce. You're using Kedusha Shvius produce for the Minchas HaOmer. We have a contradiction. This is problematic because that the pasuk says, you eat Peres Kedusha Shvius. You eat the wheat of Shvius. You eat the barley of Shvius. You don't burn the barley of Shvius. How could it be that we're using Kedusha Shvius barley for the Minchas HaOmer? We're going to be burning it. You can't burn it, you got to eat it. Amalei. So to which Rav Chizde responds to Rami bar Choma, I don't understand the question. Rachmana Amar Lach L'Dorosechem, Bat Omer Tibatel, I don't understand. The pasuk says about the Minchas Omer, it says, Chukas Olam L'Dorosechem, B'chol Mashvosechem. For all generations, for all years of the Shemitah cycle, there is going to be a Minchas Omer. And you're suggesting not to offer the Minchas Omer on Shemitah? Amalei, to which Rami bar Choma says, Miko Amino Ono Tibatel? No, I'm not saying Chaz v'shuleisis that we should skip the Minchas HaOmer. Of course we should offer the Minchas HaOmer every year. Laisi mideshtakid. But let's bring the barley from last year's crop. Boina Carmel Veleka, Rav Chizda says, okay. However, here's the thing, the pasuk says Carmel. What does Carmel mean when it comes to the mincha? Soft and squishy. The mincha, the barley needs to be soft and squishy, right? And if you bring it from last year, it's not going to be soft and squishy. But, well, what do you mean? Bring it from last year's soft and squishy. It was soft and squishy last year. We need it to be soft and squishy now, at the time that it's offered. Okay, so we can offer the Omer from the Kedusha Shvius barley because we need it to be soft and squishy. It was stated, Rabbi Yochanan Omer says, Rabbi Yochanan Kaimel Takrib. Rabbi Yochanan says, like we just said less than a minute ago, that the Omer the barley needs to be soft and squishy. Rabbi Elazar Omer, right, and therefore it needs to come from this year's crop. Rabbi Elazar from the Chadash. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Reishis Ketzircha V'Lasov Ketzircha, says Rabbi Elazar, it says the beginning of the harvest. It's got to be the beginning of the harvest, this year's harvest, the Chadash, not the end of last year's harvest. Rabbi asks a question. V'im takriv minchas bikurim. That when the pasuk says, if you are going to offer a minchas bikurim, the minchas haomer, because the pasuk is talking about minchas haomer, me'echani ba'a min asaorim. The minchas haomer, the barley offering is barley. The Omer offering is barley. Wait, maybe the Omer offering is actually wheat. Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer nemer aviv b'mitzrayim v'never aviv l'doros. It says aviv by the Omer and it says aviv by Mitzrayim. I believe at the end of Parshas Va'era. Ma aviv Omer b'mitzrayim, just like aviv in Mitzrayim sorim, right? What does the pasuk say? It says v'apishta v'asora nukasa ki asora aviv v'apishta givoil. That it says seora aviv. So aviv is barley, and it says aviv also by the minchas omer. It says aviv kalu ba'esh geres karmel, etc. So ma'aviv omer l'mitzrayim sorim, just like aviv in Egypt was barley. Av aviv omer l'doris enu ba'ela min hasorim. So also the barley, for when it comes to Minchas Omer, we are talking about, also when it comes to Minchas Omer, we're talking about barley, right? Just like in Egypt, Aviv is barley, so Aviv by Minchas Omer is also barley. Rabbi Kiva Omer says, Rabbi Kiva, Matzinu Yochid Shemevi Chayvasoi Min Achitin, Umevi Chayvasoi Min Asorin. An individual brings an obligatory mincha from wheat, that is the minchas chote. If a person is obligated to bring a minchas chote, that is wheat, and if a woman is obligated to bring a minchas sota, that is barley. I'm going to now change around the phrases for the next line or two or three in a way that goes with tzionim. So here we go. V'tzibur mevi chovaso min achitin, and we also know that the congregation, the public, also offers an obligatory wheat offering, which is the Shtei Halechem. Ma'yochid maybe chavaso min achitin, or maybe chavaso min asorin. Just like an individual brings an obligatory offering from wheat, the Shtei Halechem, and an obligatory offering from barley, the minchas sota. So too, the congregation that they bring a korban mincha from wheat, the Shtei Halechem, so they are also going to be bringing an obligatory mincha offering from barley. What's the obligatory mincha offering that they're going to be bringing from barley? The minchas haomer. Im ata omer min hachitin. And if you say that the minchas haomer is wheat, so then there will be no obligatory barley offering. So what did we just say? We were basically saying that by an individual, individuals have obligatory wheat minchas chote, and obligatory barley minchas sota. So that means that also the tzibur, the congregation, is going to have, for consistency, for symmetry, an obligatory wheat mincha and an obligatory barley mincha. The obligatory wheat mincha is the Shtei Halechem. If we say that the Omer is also wheat, well then we don't have an obligatory barley offering mincha. So therefore it must be that the Omer is barley. That way there's an obligatory barley Omer. Alternatively, imata Omer Omer b'menachitin, if you say that the Omer is wheat, ein Shtei Halechem bikurim, well, it says bikurim by the Minchas Omer, and it says bikurim by the Shtei Halechem. If you say that the Omer is wheat, well then, when you go to offer the Shtei Halechem 2 months later, it's no longer bikurim. It's no longer the first mincha being offered with the wheat because the barley was already offered with wheat. If this sounds familiar, it is familiar. We had this discussion. Where did we have this? We had this on Daf somewhere. Daf Samches maybe. Okay. Tomer above menachitin ein Shtei Halechem bikurim alma mishum bikurimu tufta. So this alternative answer by Rabbi Akiva is that it says bikurim by the Omer and it says bikurim by the Shtei Halechem, which means that both the Omer and the Shtei Halechem need to be new. So if you say that the Omer is barley, so it's the first mincha of barley, and you say that the Shtei Halechem is wheat, so it's the first mincha of wheat, so each one is new in their own way. But if you say that the Omer is wheat and the Shtei Halechem is also wheat, well then what's new about the Shtei Halechem? So rather it must be that the Omer is barley. Now we're saying from here, so Alma Mishum Bikurim Hu Tufta. So we see it's about being bikurim, the first crop tufta. So Rashi says it's a tufta on Rab Yochanan because Rab Yochanan had learned out from Carmel, and here we're saying that it needs to, that the Omer needs to be from the right. We're learning that the Omer needs to be, I guess, from the barley crop. And that's being learned out from the fact that it says bikurim. And therefore, I think the point is that we want to learn out, okay, so bikurim also means that it's got to be from the chadash, which is more similar to, according to Rashi, that's how I understand Rashi, more similar to Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Lazar, who says that it's learned from Reishis Ketzircha, that it's got to be from the new crop, as opposed to Rabbi Yochanan says that it's learned from Carmel. But Tosfos says it's Taka Kasha on both Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Lazar really doesn't learn enough from bikurim either. He also learns that from Reishis, which is a different pasuk. But okay, fine. Now moving on to the next section of today's daf, where the bikurim come from. Tananosim, we learn in the Mishnah in bikurim, the third Mishnah of Masechta Bikurim. Ein meviim bikurim chutz mishivas haminim. The bikurim are the 7 species. Then when we talk about the first fruits, bring the first fruits to the Beis Hamikdash, we're talking about wheat, barley. We're talking about pomegranates. Talking about olives, dates, figs. What am I forgetting? Grapes. Hopefully I didn't double up there. Right. Eretz chita v'sora gefen teina rimon eretz zeis shemen and dvash, which is dates. V'lo mitmar shebaharim, but don't bring the bikurim from the dates in the mountains. They're too sweet. V'lo perish ba'amokim, and not from the grains, not from the wheat and barley in the valleys. You don't want to bring from those either. No good. Ula maybe lo kiddush, and says ula to the extent that if you bring the dates from the mountains or the grains from the valley, no good. It doesn't work for the bikurim. Yosef Rabba v'ka'amar la shmaita. But Rabba, however, was saying this over. Eser Rab Acha bar Abba l'Rabba, and Rab Acha bar Abba asked a question on Rabba from the following brisa: Korban Reishis. That when the pasuk says by Shtei Halechem, Korban Reishis Shtei Reishis L'chol Menachos, that the Shtei Halechem has to be the first of all of the flour offerings. V'cheinu Omer, it similarly says Ba'akrivchem mincha chadasha l'Hashem b'Shavuosechem, that on Shavuos you bring the new mincha. It's the first mincha of the year from the new crop, from the Chodesh. All I know is that the Shtei Halechem is the first mincha brought with the Chodesh wheat. All I know is that that the Shtei Halechem, that all menachos that are brought with wheat, which is most of the menachos, have to wait until after the Shtei Halechem. How do you like that? That only once the Shtei Halechem is offered, that is matir the chadash for wheat menachos in the Beis Hamikdash. What about barley menachos? So this is taka very, very interesting. So this is interesting because I had stumbled upon this. I don't remember when, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I don't remember when. That I was wondering if, okay, so there's only two examples of barley minchas. There is the minchas Omer. Obviously, the minchas Omer is coming from the chadash. It's coming from the new barley. However, there's also the minchas sota. The minchas sota is also barley. And the question is, let's say you have a sota between Pesach and Shavuos. Is the minchas sota, can that come from chadash? So I wasn't sure. I thought maybe, because after all, the Omer is barley. The Omer is a barley mincha offering in the Beis Hamikdash. So maybe once the Omer is offered, which is a barley offering, maybe that allows the barley offerings to be from Chadash in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, most Menachos are wheat, and they have to wait for the Shtei Halechem. But maybe, what about the barley? What about Minchas Sota? A Minchas Sota post-Pesach, would that be from Chadash, or would it still have to be from Yoshan until the Shtei Halechem? So, is offered. So, interestingly, I wasn't sure at the time. I think I then looked it up. I don't remember where. Maybe I looked up this Gemara. I can't remember. And I concluded that no, the Minchas Sota would have to wait till after the Shtei Halechem. That only that yes, the Omer is offered on Pesach, and that's from the Chadash barley, but all other Menachos can only be offered from the Chadash post the Shtei Halechem, and that even includes the Minchas Sota, which is barley. Now, that is how the Rashi up top understands it. The Rashi manuscript gives two possibilities. That's the first possibility, but he actually prefers a different possibility, which is all I know is that the Shtei Halechem are matir menachos, the wheat menachos, that from after the Shtei Halechem, wheat menachos can now come from Chadash. Chadash shel sorim minayin. What about barley offerings? How do I know that it's the Omer, that just like the Shtei Halechem is matir the wheat flour offerings, the Omer is matir the barley flour offerings? Tamlomer chadasha chadasha. It says by the Shtei Halechem chadasha twice. I mean, in the chadasha shel chitin, and if it's not necessary for the chadash of the wheat Menachos right, because we already know that the Shtei Halechem is going to be matir the wheat Menachos. Today we're in the Chadash shel sorim. Say that it's talking about the Chadash shel sorim. So again, either it means that the Shtei Halechem are matir now Menachos to be brought. So essentially the Minchas Sota to now be brought from the new barley, or alternatively that it's teaching that the Omer is matir the Minchas Sota to be brought from the new barley. So I think it's taka not clear. I think certainly not clear to me, obviously, but it seems that it's taka machlokes if the Omer is matir the Minchas Sota to be brought from Chadash, or if it's the Shtei Halechem that's matir the Minchas Sota to be brought from Chadash because it's barley. So the question is if the Omer is going to be matir that barley offering. But certainly any wheat Menachos are going to have to wait until after the Shtei Halechem. How do we know that the Shtei Halechem have to be offered prior to the bikurim being accepted in the Beis Hamikdash? Talmud Lomar v'chag Shavuos taise licha. You make Chag Shavuos for you bikurei ksir chitim. First you have Shavuos. First you have the Shtei Halechem, and then you can have the bikurim. Ve'en the bikurei ksir chitim. Right? The pasuk says we just said v'chag Shavuos taise licha. Bikurim k'tzir chitin. All I know is that the Shtei Halechem are matir bikurim from wheat, right? The bikurim, as we said earlier, are the Shiva Saminim, including wheat, including barley. K'tzir sorim minayin. How do I know that the Shtei Halechem is matir the bikurim of barley? Tavlomer v'chag akotzir shavuos bikurim ma'asecha asher tizro basodeh. The bikurim of whatever you plant, whatever you seed in the field. So therefore that includes not just wheat, but barley that you seed, that you plant in the field as well. All I know is if you planted the wheat and you planted the barley, what if they just kind of popped up on their own? How do I know I could bring those as first fruits? Talmud Omer, basada in the field, however, whatever is in the field, whether you planted it, whether it popped up on its own. Basada minayin the rabbis shebagag. How do I know that I can even bring And here's the question. The question comes from here. How do I know that bikurim can even come from stuff that grew on the roof, grew in a haunted house, grew in a potted plant, and grew on a boat? Talmud bikurim kol asher ba'artzim, the bikurim of anything in the land, whether it's on a boat in the land, whether it's on a roof in the land, whether it's in a haunted house in the land, or whether it is in a pot in the land. You will bring them as bikurim. How do I know not just wheat, not just barley, but how do I know that the Shtei Halechem are going to be prior to the chadash from wine libations and from fruits also, the bikurim from fruits, the Shtei Halechem precedes them. Nemarkan bikure ma'asecha v'nemalolin be'ospicha is ma'asecha min asada. In the same pasuk, what's the pasuk? The pasuk says v'chaga kotzer, that Shavuos, bikure ma'asecha asher tizua basada v'chaga osif, which is Sukkos, v'tzeis hashana ba'ospicha is ma'asecha min asada. Just like by Sukkos malolin, we're talking about gathering everything, including the sachim uferis. At that point, you're gathering everything. You're gathering grapes for wine. You're gathering all other fruits. Uferis ilan afkan. Also, when it comes to bikurim, we're talking about nesachim, uferis ilan. It includes wine. It includes the fruits of the trees. I.e., the Shtei Halechem is going to be matir only after the Shtei Halechem. Can you offer the bikurim, all of the bikurim, wheat, barley, and all the rest of the fruits as well? Now, katarni mias, in that long technical brisa, we did nonetheless learn shebagag v'shebachurba v'shebaotzitz v'shebasvino. That produce, that the shiva saminim that grew on a roof, in a haunted house, in a pot, and on a boat, they can be brought as bikurim. So if they can be brought as bikurim, certainly dates which grew in the mountains or grain that grew in the valleys, they could certainly be considered bikurim. If even a produce that grew on a boat would be considered bikurim. So, and for the Gemara, where are we? So, and for the Gemara, seifas on the menachos. When it talks about the roof and the haunted house, etc., that's not talking about bikurim. That's talking about menachos. That these grains that grow in a haunted house, on a roof, on a boat, etc., they can be used for menachos. Bikurim, no, not for bikurim. But Adar says, wait. That same pasuk, right? We said, how do we know about the roof and the haunted house, etc.? It said, the pasuk said, "Bikure kol asher ba'asim," everything in your land, including haunted houses and boats and things. Now that same pasuk, however, says, "Bikure kol asher ba'asim asher yaviu l'Hashem l'cha yiyeh kol tar b'veischa yochalenu." Anybody who's tahor in your house can eat it, not just the male kohanim, but anybody, your wives, children, everybody can eat it. But the menachos, if we're saying no, that's only talking about menachos. Menachos are kadshe kadshim. That's being in Nazar by the zichrik uno. The zichrik uno udim is achlen. They're only eaten by the male kohanim. Menachos kadshe kadshim. So why are we saying anybody can eat it? So Rav Misharsha trei kraiksiv. Look, you have to understand the pasuk in the following way. When the pasuk says bikure kol asher ba'atzam, which talks about the roof and the haunted house and the boat, etc., asher aviu l'Hashem l'cha yiyeh, that is talking about specifically menachos, and the menachos is l'cha yiyeh is for you, the male kohanim. When it says kol tar b'veischa yochalenu, that part is talking about bikurim. Okay, so tzarkai ksiva l'cha yiyeh uchsiv kol tar b'veischa yochal also haketzad kam b'vikurim kam b'menachos. When it says l'cha yiyeh, it's for you, it's for the zikrei kuna. That's talking about the menachos, which are kadshe kadshim. When it says kol tar b'veischa yochal also, then anybody can eat it. That part is talking about bikurim. Rav Ashi Omer says, Rav Ashi kula b'menachos. It's all talking about menachos. Well, then why is it talking about anybody can eat it? V'seifa dekra ason l'lach metoda. When it talks about anybody can eat it, it's talking about, anybody in your household. It's talking about the truma of the lachmi toda. As we've been discussing, there are 40 toda breads, and one of each of the 4 types of breads goes to the kohanim. Now that can be eaten, right? As the Mishnah says in Perek Ezu Mekolman, Hamur mehem kayotze behem. that the truma of the korban toda can be eaten by not just the kohanim, but their wives, their children, their slaves. They can enjoy the loaves from the korban toda. But the other menachos, though, would have to be enjoyed by the kohanim, the male kohanim. And this whole question about the dates from the mountains and the grains from the valleys, can they be brought as bikurim? It is a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Imevi Lo Kadesh. Rabbi Yochanan says, like Ula says, that if they are brought, they are not kadosh. You cannot bring bikurim from the dates of the mountains and the grains of the valley. Maybe Lo Kadesh. Rish Lakish says Rish Lakish maybe Kadesh. Rish Lakish says that if the bikurim is brought from the dates of the mountains and the grain of the valley, it is kadosh. It is bikurim. Naisek kachush bikochim. It's similar to, for example, if you're makdish a weak animal, a frail animal as a korban, it's b'di'evid, but it is nonetheless going to be a korban. So here also it's b'di'evid, but it will be bikurim according to Rish Lakish. Bishlam Rish Lakish Kedamar Taima. So I understand Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish gave his rationale for why he says that nonetheless it is kosher bikurim. Ela Rabbi Yochanan my time. But why does Rabbi Yochanan say that it is not kadosh? It is not proper. It won't count as bikurim if you bring the dates from the mountains and the grain from the valleys. Rabbi Yochanan chazoi b'chaloim. I saw Rabbi Yochanan in a dream. Milsam ayus amina. That's a good omen that what I'm about to say is probably correct. That Omar Kra, the rationale for Rabbi Yochanan saying that bringing bikurim from the dates of the mountains and the grain of the valleys does not work because the pasuk says meireshis v'lo koresh. It says right v'lakachta meireshis pri adama, from the first fruits, but not all first fruits. It is limiting it to the shivas haminim. Mei artzcha v'lo kol artzcha. And when it says mei artzcha, not all of your land, but from a subset of your land. So even of the shivas haminim, not all shivas haminim. There are some shivas haminim you can't bring. For example, you can't bring the dates of the mountains and the grains of the valley. Rish Lakish, hi mei artzcha mei ovidle. What does Rish Lakish do with mei artzcha that Rabbi Yochanan says to limit those dates from the mountains, etc.? He needs it for, like we learn in a brayser. But Gamliel by Rebbe Omer says Gamliel by Rebbe Nemar Kan Eretz v'Nemar Lalan Eretz. It says Eretz by the bikurim, but it also says Eretz by Eretz Chita v'Sora Eretz whatever Eretz Chita v'Sora v'Gefen Teir and V'Rimon Eretz Yishem and Advash, etc. Ma Lahalan Shvach Eretz Av Kan Shvach Eretz. Just like that Eretz is talking about the 7 species, so also by the bikurim we're talking about the 7 species. Ve'idach Eretz Mei Eretz, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says Einach Hinami, we can learn that Gezerah Shava, but it still says Mei Eretz, that even from among the 7 species, there is a limitation. It excludes the dates of the mountains and the grain of the valleys. Ve'idach Eretz Me'eretz Lo Mashmalei, whereas Rish Lakish does not hold of the Eretz Mei Eretz limitation, and therefore he just says that all 7 species, even if they're from the dates of the mountains and the grain of the valley. Tani Chada, one brisa says Sheba Gag, V'Sheba Churva, V'Sheba Otzitz, V'Sheba Svina, that produce that grows on a roof, on a haunted house, on a pot, on a boat. Maybe you could bring bikurim, Vikori, and you read Mikra Bikurim, like we said in the Haggadah, Arami, Oved, Ovi, etc. You read it. Vesani Idach, we learn another verse that says, Mevi Ve'enokori, that you bring the produce of these locations, but you would not read Arami, Oved, Ovi. You would not read Mikra Bikurim. Bishlam Rish Lakish. So I understand Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish is groovy. Rish Lakish says that you bring. By Rish Lakish said that you bring. That if you bring bikurim from the dates of the mountains and the grain of the valley, it works. So according to him, okay, I can understand these brises. These brises are saying that even the Shivas Aminim that come from the roofs and the haunted houses, etc., you would bring the bikurim. Now it's a shaila whether you would say mikra bikurim or not. Would you read Arami Ovid Avi? Okay, so we'll answer that question. But everyone agrees that it would be bikurim, and if that would be bikurim, then certainly the dates of the mountains and the grains of the produce would the grains of the valleys would also be considered bikurim. Now, in terms of why in one place it says that from the roofs and the haunted houses and the boats, etc., you read mikra bikurim, arami ovid avi, and one place says you don't. Okay, we'll answer that. Gag lo kasha, in terms of the roofs, it's no problem. Ha begag de mayra de begag de bais. Depends if it's the roof of a cave. Well, that's just the earth, and yeah, you would read mikra bikurim. If it's the roof of a house, you would not read mikra bikurim. You would not say along with, right, when you bring the bikurim, you would not say arami ovid avi, etc. Churva achurva lo kasha, and in terms of the haunted house, not a problem. Kan b'churva avuda, kan b'churva she'ena avuda. One is some abandoned, cultivated place, and another is some abandoned, uncultivated place. If it's cultivated, you would say Rami Ovid Avi. If it's uncultivated, you would not say Rami Ovid Avi. Otzitz so kasha, kan b'nokub, kan b'she'ena nokub. In terms of the pot, it depends. If there's a hole in the pot, so that there's a way for the roots to get into the ground, so then you would read mikra bikurim. If there was no hole in that pot, it was a sealed pot, you would not read mikra bikurim. And finally, svina lokash, in terms of the boat, nishgeferlach kan besvina shel eis, kan besvina shel cheres. If we're talking about an earthenware boat, well, that's earthenware. You would say mikra bikurim. A wooden boat, you would not say mikra bikurim. El Rabbi Yochanan kasher. What are Rabbi Yochanan? Because here we're saying that everyone agrees at the very least that you would bring bikurim from these things, from produce that grows on a boat, for example. Certainly then you would bring bikurim from dates from the mountains and grain from the valleys. Tanoi, he would say, well, it's taka machlokes tanoim. Desani, we learned in the Brisa that the following Tana holds, she bigag v'shebechurva maybe bikore, that from, right, this produce that grows on a roof that was the roof of a cave, v'shebechurva, or a deserted area that was cultivated. Maybe bikurim, you would bring bikurim and say mikra bikurim. Sheba otzitz, but in a pot, v'sheba sfina, and on a boat, eno maybe kol iker, you wouldn't bring them at all. And just like you wouldn't bring from a pot, I assume we're talking about a pot without a hole in it, or a sfina, a wooden boat. So also from the mountains and the grains of the valleys, you wouldn't bring at all either. We had then, the Mishnah had ended off saying that all of the korbanos need to come from the best stuff. And then he mentioned a place called Afarayim, that the grain can come from a place called Afarayim. That was a place of really good grain. Amrile Yochana umamre leMoshe Teven atamachnis lafarayim. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to Egypt and he was showing signs from the Rabbanu Shalom, little magic tricks of sorts, and he showed it to the magicians of Paro, Yochana and Mamre, Paro's magicians. Even the Rashi and the Daf says Roshei Mechashrim Shomosayim. They were the chief magicians of Egypt. They said, seriously, Moshe Rabbeinu, are you seriously bringing grain into Afarayim? I don't say, you're bringing, we're the kings of magic. You really think you're going to press us by showing up here with a magic trick? We can do all sorts of sorcery. It's like you're coming to Afarayim, which is a place known for its grain, and you're coming with grain. Mazel tov. This is the best grain in the world. Why are you coming here with grain? What do you think? So Amalui says to him, no, that's dafka the point. Look, to a place that's known for the vegetables, that is where you want to bring your vegetables, because that's where all the buyers are going to be. If it's known for their vegetables, that's where the people are coming to. And if you have vegetables that you believe in, that you think are really the best, you're going to find yourself quite a market here. And Moshe Rabbeinu says that's punct the point. I'm coming to a place which is full of sorcery, and I'm going to show you that this is next level. That's exactly my point. Friends, that was Daf Pei Dal, Daf 84 of Masechta Menachos. On Daf 84 of Masechta Menachos, we began the 9th parak of Masechta Menachos, and we discussed where the Omer and Shtei Halechem come from. The Mishnah says that they got to be Chadash, the new grain, and they got to come from Eretz Yisrael. Now, we had seen in the Gemara different opinions who had said, well, it could even come from Yashon, and it could even come from Chutz La'aretz. Those were possibilities, but they would disagree with the Tana of our Mishnah. We then learned where the bikurim come from. They come from the Shivas Aminim. There was a question about what about these dates from the mountains and these grains from the valleys. Rabbi Yochanan said you can't bring bikurim from the mountain dates and the valley grains. Rish Lakish says you can even bring bikurim from the mountain dates and the valley grains. Chever, that was Daf Peidal, Daf 84 of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day and a great moed. Hope everybody's enjoying Pesach. Cheers.